Let's roll. This is Countercharge, your podcast for ranks, flanks, and kings of war. Join your hosts as they delve into the world of Panithor and bring you worldwide coverage of all things Kings of War.
Welcome to Countercharge. I'm Rob Fanoff.
And I am Jeremy Duvall. And I am still alive, Rob.
That's a thing we've been getting a lot lately. Where's Jeremy? Is he around?
I have not pissed off Papa Rob enough to be kicked off the show.
He's not been banished to the dungeon.
I've been banished to the dungeon.
You've got the same issue I have, which is work has been complete insanity for me. Taking over a new team, and it's a whole new customer-facing team. So I have stakeholders, and sometimes we're doing good, and sometimes we're not doing good. And so I'm working a lot more hours than I think I was anticipating. But you know what? They keep the lights on, so I'll keep showing up.
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you. Work has been busy. And then as a side gig, I teach part-time for UC Davis. And that sort of work kind of floats around how much hobby stuff is there that I want to buy. Then I'm calling my UC Davis contact and going like, is there any stuff I could pick up? Because that's really like my fun money. So there's been so much cool stuff to buy with 4th edition, everything getting ready. So I've been working, and then we just got back from a 2-week vacation to Disney World, and then we went on a Disney cruise. So that was a lot of fun, but it's been cool now to be back and be focused, starting to get focused on, I'm thinking I'm going to take a couple weeks off in December and have a staycation. And I'm going to finish organizing my garage, get it ready. I've asked Santa Claus for a 3D printer this year.
Resin or a filament printer?
I'm going to start with filament.
It's really great for basing, terrain, that kind of thing. And it's easier to do like a one-off thing. Whereas a resin printer, you got to like fill the thing, and you really need to maximize the usage. You got to print a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Whereas the filament printer, like I can print one thing. I can print a base. It doesn't matter, right? You can print as little as much as you want.
And I love, like you, Rob, I'm all about the bling, so I can't wait to make my own custom box for Villainous, or all my board game, little doodads. And Stacy does a lot of big parties for the kids' birthday. So I felt like as a household, we'd get more value out of a filament printer.
Are you getting a bamboo, or what'd you ask for?
I mean, that's what I'm thinking. The bamboo seems to be, I don't know what your thoughts are.
I have a Prusa at work. It's old, but it's serviceable.
Yeah.
To be fair, if you buy a modern 3D printer, I think they're all okay.
Well, that's one thing. My sister has one of the newer bamboos, and what she says compared to her old printer, it's just so user friendly. All the slicing programs too, that it's like the filament has become almost like a plug and play experience.
You just tell it what you're using and it'll take care of the rest. Well, you haven't been on it for a little while. Hobby. You are about to regale us in the tales of hobby excellence in the pursuit of the new army. So what have you been up to in the hobby?
Well, still working on the Northern Alliance. I'm going to be going, hopefully we have Jackalopes tournament is coming up in November 8th in Reno. So I'm going to be trying to go there. I'm going to be, since I'm really committed to Northern Alliance, even if it's not done, I want to be playing it in tournaments. So I'm going to be borrowing, Nick Murray has a Northern Alliance army he's going to lend me. So it's a little different from the one I'm building, but still, which actually I think is really good because I get to try some units I've never played before. Granted, it's the last of third, it's 3.5, so it's the end of the edition.
Last of the hurrah. It's the last hurrah.
Excited. Yeah, still excited to be playing, so I'm super committed to Northern Alliance. So especially after going to Disney and going on the Frozen ride and seeing some, I have some fun ideas for my Ice Mage I'm thinking of. So yeah, so still with that, I'm trying to I'm in the tail end of freeing up some organizational space. It's not really hobby, but I've been trying to organize all my stupid Star Wars cards, and I'm so done with organizing Star Wars cards, but I'm at the final thing for that. I did pick up, Rob. I'm interested to try them. I got the new Army Painter Speed Paint pens. Have you messed with those at all yet?
I've seen them. I haven't used them.
Yeah, so I picked those up. I love Army Painter products, as you know. I love the speed paints. I love their Fanatic range is my main paint range. Really like it. So I'm going to try the pens on some stuff and see kind of how they sort of handle out. But Outside of the thing in November, 8th for Jackalopes, and I'm going to have a couple weeks off in December, I'm not really doing much. So I'm going to have a lot of staycation time. So I'm ready to hunker down in sort of a wet and rainy California winter and get a lot of hobby done over the holiday season.
My hobby has been atrociously poor. I will say my daughter is doing a trunk or treat for her art club. She said, Dad, could you help me? We want to do the Great Pumpkin. And I'm like, do you want to do it normal or do you want to do it like Rob level? So yes, we built a 6-foot wide foam pumpkin. It's 2D. It's not a big thing, right? It's just using insulation foam. It's extremely big. And then the full pumpkin patch with a bunch of fake pumpkins. And we got the banner that hangs up behind. You see Snoopy riding his, sitting on his house dressed in the World War I.
The Red Baron or whatever it is.
The Red Baron stuff, yeah. I also have a hobby project getting ready to kick off. I was at Michigan GT. My nephew came, and he's like, yeah. I like Kings of War, but this Middle Earth stuff is out of control. It's cool. He's 11. So I said, all right, here's the deal. You read The Hobbit, and his mom won't let him watch the movies until he reads the book. So we've got two things. He's got to read the book. It's not a long read. And then he's got to watch the 3 movies. And then he has to decide what army he wants to play in The Hobbit. I already have Goblin Town Goblins already based and primed, so now I need to finish those. My daughter and him have to decide what armies they're playing. I said, what do you want to be? I said, do you want to be like Lothlorien elves? The Mirkwood elves? She's like, no, I want to be the High Elves.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, you mean like Elrond? She's like, yes. So that's coming. And then at work, it's been crazy. I'm working on team engagement and getting that culture. And we have been playing a crap ton of board games at lunchtime with the team.
Oh, cool.
And we have just got into Magic now.
Okay.
I played Magic many, many years ago, but I picked up the Final Fantasy Magic. And so we're starting to dabble. And I don't know that it's everybody's cup of tea. Some of the board games we've been playing, everybody's enjoyed it. Legend of Draxia has been the biggest hit.
Yeah.
Because it's simple, right? It's not an overly complicated engine builder. More to come on that. In fact, I might even get those guys on at some point and go back in and maybe we do a side episode on board games. We haven't done that in a while. So
that'd be cool.
All that being said, we're not here to talk about hobby tonight. It's been a little quiet since the last time we talked about 4th edition. But now the floodgates are about to open.
Yeah, we're on the home stretch, right?
We are on the home stretch. So we are going to be digging into the army building rules in full. We have the full set of rules in front of us, and we're going to dive in and we're going to talk about how you build an army in 4th edition. How does that compare to 3.5? And along the way, I promise there'll be some things that you may not have known about. Because the one question everybody asks, oh yeah, I know how to build an army, but what's core? What's specialist? What's support?
Yeah.
Side note, we're also working on Forces of the Abyss Army Review for 4th edition.
Special thanks to Mantic. Mantic usually sometimes pass in playtesting. Playtesters have seen sort of the final, copy before it goes to print, but Mantic has had much more of an organized, plan this go around. So this was my first time, even as a playtester, seeing some of the final print stuff. So really excited. So just keep in mind, as Rob and I are like talking about these things, we have not seen the whole book. We've seen sort of the sections that we're talking about. So there still might be a little bit of context that we don't quite catch, because we're looking at the army building rules versus we don't have a holistic look at the full game. But what we can do is we can take a look at the new army building system. We'll talk a little bit today about its structure, how it works, some interesting ideas, and also like some curious stuff on maybe how is this going to sort of change outside of just the technical aspect of army construction? What may this do to the meta? All that stuff. But before we sort of dive into the new system, Rob, I'm curious, and I know my answer to this question, but like, for you playing 3.5, where were you sort of in looking into 4th? Were you like, I'm ready for a new army building system? I love the system that we have already. Or sort of what was your thoughts at the tail end of 3.5 as far as, looking at what system we had before we take a look at the new system?
There's a lot of reasons we needed a new system. But for me personally, I needed a new puzzle. Like, because I've already kind of looked at my armies and I've built what I feel is like the optimal version of that army for me, whether it's goblins. And I'm optimal for me. I take Luggets, right? But I already have all the accoutrements and stuff. I'm ready for a new challenge of let's take what I think I know in context of a new rule set. let's develop a new army. And I think what we're going to talk about tonight is giving us those things.
There's something about miniature gaming and gaming in general that's fun when you have to solve a puzzle, right? You're trying to solve and what I really loved, and I know you share this idea, sometimes it's not solving the ultimate power puzzle, it's solving the puzzle for you. Like, how do I want to play goblins, or how do I want to play Basalia? And I'm solving that puzzle for me. So my puzzle playing Basalia may be a different puzzle that someone else is trying to solve playing for that same army. However, once you solve that puzzle for you, that puzzle's solved, right? And you sort of like, okay, well, this is the army, this is how it works. So I think the game definitely was in need of a new army list construction system for many reasons, right? To take away that stale flavor, to look at spam, and we'll talk a little bit that today as we're breaking about how might this do it, and also I think it's interesting. I think there's going to be some nice new levers added to this army construction system that are going to help with balance, not just balance now, but balancing in the future. So I'm exactly right there with you, Rob. I really like the idea of staying true to the spiritual core of Kings of War, but 4th edition is a different game, right? It's going to be a new game for us to all learn, with maybe certain strategies taken away, but new strategies added. And I think that's actually good for the health of a game. Every now and then you need to shake things up. You need to add a little bit of the unknown, right? I think a lot of 3.5, the game was sort of known of what it like. You are who we thought you were, And I think that 4th is really adding a little bit of the magic into creating something that we don't know. We don't know what's going. And for me, that's super exciting.
And I think this new system is the great table, if you will, on which to bring these new army lists as they come out. When you add the army list on top of the 4th edition army building system, that's where the love and the joy for me is going to come in, because you're going to have to figure out each army specifically. It's a completely different type of system.
Carrying some things that we're still playing a points game, right? It's still a point system. The section on army building suggests games between 15 and 2,500 points. And I think always with this, Rob, the community will find the sweet spot, right? It always does. Whether it's 2,000 points, 2,300 points, 1995, I think once we have a sort of 6 months to a year of tournaments, we'll sort of figure out, is 2,300 the new 2,300, or is 2,000 the new 2,300? I think the community will figure that out.
Just from a little bit of information I've seen, feels like things are getting more expensive. And so the new 2,300 would be 2,500 points, is my guess.
And that may be we may skew towards 2,500.
I'm looking at this in a vacuum, right? Very select pieces. Until I have the whole book, I can't really confirm that. But that's my initial feel.
We're now within a battalion structure, right? Previously in Kings of War, we had unlocked things based on size of units that you chose, not determining what that unit does. So it was like hordes would unlock this, whether it was a horde of spearmen or a horde of highly specialized troops. And instead, this battalion structure is looking at very much when you look at this chart, Rob, I call it an oldie but a goodie. There's elements in the sort of force org battalion structure chart that they're using that to me feels like both new but also very familiar. And sometimes you don't need to reinvent the wheel, right?
No, it feels a little bit like harkening back to Warhammer, but at the same time, I see the essence of Firefight.
Yeah, so basically you're going to start your army building battalion with a couple of things that you have to take, right? No matter what. You got to take 2 core choices. And as you're going to see at the list, when you think of core choices, I think it's going to feel familiar to you. It's like your core, basic, fundamental.
The rabble. That's what I'm expecting, right? The stuff that we always take in a few lists to unlock other stuff is typically going to be your core.
Exactly. Ronnie and Alessio have talked a lot about like, how is it? What makes sense? So it's going to be a lot of your core choices are the things that you think they should be, right? Your core troops. And then you got to take one commander, which could either be a champion, so those are your lesser commanders, or you can have a max up to 1 warlord. So that means you got to have at least 1 commander in a battalion that can either be a champion or a warlord, and 2 core units. Your building blocks, your initial Lego pieces.
That's what you got to start with.
And then from there, you have a couple options. You can take auxiliary units. You can take 1 auxiliary unit for each core you have. And auxiliary units are going to be your kind of like smaller size core units, troops, irregular units, right? Because it's not really like unlocking anything. Those are kind of all your little like accoutrements, like your little scout, some of the stuff like that. You can take one of those per core. Your specialists, you can take one for each core unit. So your specialists, those are your units that have special weapons or special abilities, right? Those are your like spec ops guys, are your more elite type units, the ones that we always run into issues when they're spammed, right, Rob? That's sort of how I view the specialist unit, is those are going to be sort of the units why you want to play the faction. We've called them like Halo units.
Let's give an example.
Yeah, go for it.
Core units, lower abyssals. Specialist, berserkers.
Exactly. So you can't make a list of only berserkers, right? You got to have those core units in there to unlock it.
Right. And in each battalion, you can take up to 4 specialist units, but for every one you want to take, you have to have 1 core unit. So if you take 4 core units, you can have 4 specialist units.
Yes, that's correct. Core does not have a cap. You can take as much core as you want. You just have to take at least 2. But with specialists, you can take up to 4 with 1 for each core unit that's in that battalion. And then next sort of within that milieu is you have the support units. So when you think of supports, these are your big boys, right? These are your dragons or giants.
Siege breakers.
Big honky, chonky boys, right? And these you can also take up to 4. And for this sort of category, you can take 1 per every combination of either 2 core troops or core and specialist. So basically, the support you're unlocking based on 1 per 2 core specialist units selected.
So if you had 2 core and 2 specialists, you could get 2 support.
2 supports, exactly.
If you had 4 core and 4 specialists, which is the max for specialists, you would have, that's a total of 8. You could take 4.
You could take 4.
And we should say support is also 0 to 4.
The maximum.
So you can take 4 specialists and 4 support in a battalion. And when we're done with this, we'll talk about how you could take multiple battalions.
So think of your support. Those are your big chonky monsters or the sort of specialty units that don't fall into that specialist category. I wonder if they're going to use this sort of tool as also like a balancing tool. Maybe a unit starts as core, but they find out they want to move it to specialists or vice versa. To me, it's like it's another tool you can use to balance things. I always was frustrated when I took only 2 copies of a unit, and at 2 copies of a unit, it was good. But at 8 copies of it, it was bad, so they made it worse, which made the 8-copy version not as bad, but it meant mine, who just wanting to take 2 copies of it, not function. So in general, like, what's your sense? Are you liking the... I'm sort of a fan of this. I got to have my basic troops to unlock my good stuff.
I like it. I've been kind of thinking about my army list today and just how that would impact it. And it's making a lot of sense. And we should also mention the commanders. Just like with support, for every 2 core / specialist you take, you get 1 commander. And you can take up to 4 commanders. So again, we go to that thing where we said you take 4 core and 4 specialists, which maxes out your specialist. You can take 4 support, but you can additionally take 4 commanders. You got to take 1. And in that 4, you can only have 1 warlord. So you could take 1 warlord and 3 champions.
And they've introduced a couple new concepts, which I think we can riff on a little bit here, is the idea there's going to be limited versus unique units. So limited is going to be familiar with, because maybe it will have a bracket 2 or a bracket 1 or a bracket 4. And the idea is you can take, of limited units, you can take that many of that unit within 1 battalion. To take additional battalions, you have to make sure your battalion that you started with, that initial battalion, has 4 core units, and following all the other legal criteria, you can then take an additional battalion. So for those limited units, it's going to be really interesting to see what units are limited, and is there going to be list building strategy to take, okay, well, this really good unit, I can only take 1 per battalion. So am I going to try to get multiple battalions in my army so I can take more of those limited? But it's difficult because you got to have 4 core choices, right, before you add in that second battalion.
And you got to have a commander model to have a legal battalion. And you have a
commander, so it's good. I think it's going to present some really interesting choices. And then the other side of that limited side is, the other side of that coin is unique. Unique units will be units that you can only have one in your entire army.
Special characters, named heroes.
You can't have like 2 battalions each with Nias or whatever, right? Whereas there may be units that are limited, so they're limited per battalion, which means another tool to prevent spam. But if you want to design multiple battalions, you can maybe get. So what's your thoughts on this limited versus unique? I think that's, again, it's just clear. It's super clear. It's clarifying the difference.
Yeah, we should mention the unique, it's one for the whole army, doesn't matter how many battalions you have. Yeah. Limited is a limit per battalion. That's a different way to define limited units than we've had before. And there are ways around it, like we talked about. If you wanted to take, for example, more than 4 specialists, well, then you have to take a second battalion. But the cost of doing that is at least 4 core, and then you have at least 2 core in the next battalion.
If you want 2 battalions, you have to have 6 core units, period.
Yes, and 2 commanders.
And 2 commanders. So right off the bat, 6 core units and 2 commanders.
And that's a lot, right? I mean, I'm thinking goblins. I'm assuming rabble are a core. Like, okay, well, maybe that probably would be doable for maybe more of an elite army. 6 core units? I mean, again, it comes down to what are they defining as core. And I don't think it's as vanilla as we think. I think there's going to be some stuff that are pretty common that are probably going to be lumped in core. I think the line between core and specialist, in my mind, the specialist is the mid-level, the mid-tier guys. Berserker Braves. And then the support, those are more of your really heavy hitters. I mean, essentially, what's really interesting here is the way this thing is set up. You have 2 ways to limit units. Number one is you have basically a battalion structure. You can only have 4 specialists and up to 4 support. If you make something specialist, those are a little easier to get because you only have to have 1 core for each specialist. But if you want to support, you have to have at least 2 core/specialists to get the support. That's one way. But then in addition, now you have this limited number that can also limit it number of units of that type per battalion, or you can give it the unique designation that says flat out 1 per army.
Yeah, because I was thinking about it, right? If you have your hero and 2 core, that's 3 drops. If you then take 2 specialists, which is what you can take based on 2 core, I'm keeping the core at 2 for now. That's now 5 drops. And then plus my 2 support drops, because I have 2 core and 2 specialists equals 4. So that unlocks 2 supports. So that puts me at 7, plus my additional commander. That's now 8 drops. So I'm trying to think as a list builder when I'm thinking about battalions. You know what I mean? Right off the bat, the 8-unit battalion. If I'm starting to think about doing another battalion, you get into so many units that I'm thinking that maybe it's going to be like the goblins and those like Ratkin maybe that are the armies that take multiple battalions, whereas the more elite armies, I'm thinking may going to be sticking within the structure of that single battalion.
Armies that are very elite, that maybe only have 13 drops, like they're probably not necessarily getting into a second battalion. But an army that might have 20 drops, yeah, maybe they have a second battalion. At the end of the day, we're talking about this outside the context of the different army lists and how we're defining core, specialist, and support, right? That is the piece that will really inform us how many battalions are you going to take. I know for me, just thinking about it logically, I haven't seen the goblin list, but I'm just thinking, okay, Rabble's core, yeah, I'll probably just take 4 Rabble. Specialists, maybe Luggets, maybe would be my guess. Maybe Luggets could be an example.
That could be an option.
And support, I'm thinking maybe War Engines. Maybe that's where the trombones live.
Yeah, the trombones. Wingets are probably support, right? I don't know the final list, so this is not inside baseball.
We're talking about this, and this has got me excited because I'm ready for the next drop, which is, okay, I have the structure. I understand the structure.
Yeah.
I'm ready to implement the structure.
Because my guess is a lot of people are going to start with their 4 core, their 4 specialists, their 4 supports, and their hero, or 2 heroes, right? You're getting your max specialists, you're getting your max supports.
Your 4 core, your 4 specialists get you
your 4
support and 4 commanders. 16 drops.
Yeah, and not every unit can do that. So you could max out a battalion. And that's another thing. I think at the end of 3rd, we sort of came to that between 13 and 16 drops on average was sort of the sweet spot. Now, is that still going to be the sweet spot?
I don't know.
Who knows?
The other pieces that we don't know yet is unit strength. I don't know, like, is a regiment a regiment? Like, is it still going to be 2? Is it going to be 3? I don't know. I think that's going to play into it because obviously unit strength, I think, is still a game. I mean, even though it's in the advanced rules, I think it's still there will be scenarios that'll be unit strength driven. So I think the one question that I cannot answer is, in the past, there's always that question: do I want a horde, which is more cost efficient, versus taking 2 regiments to get more unit strength and more drops?
Yes.
The fact that we can only put 2 combat units into a facing, I don't know if that's going to transition to maybe incentivizing more of the hordes. And
well, I mean, I think Berserker infantry is going to be much better in this edition, right? Both from the change to shooting and the removing of waiver mechanics. I think those regiments of that -17 defense 3 or whatever it was, that unit that would just get shot off the board, I think we're going to see, and since you can't charge things as much, I think attack volume might be more important now as opposed to power of attacks based on how all these things are going to shake out. But
one thing I would comment on is, I think some people might think it feels like the rules are being dumbed down, and I actually, as I'm getting more information, there's some really intriguing organic tactics that are going to emanate from this, and we'll talk about some of this stuff in the future, but I just think there's more there. You got to think about it. There's more there than it might at first blanch. You read it one time. I don't know. I know I didn't get it the first time I read it. Things like the withdraw move is, the more I dig into that, the more I'm like, that is pretty awesome.
Mm-hmm. And even just being able to only charge 2 things to a face, that's going to create a whole nother. I think your analogy of having to solve a new problem, it's still a strategic problem we have to solve. The Rubik's Cube now just has different colors on it. It looks a little different, but we're still going to have to decide strategies, formations, all these things that go into it. And another aspect of list building, which is pretty interesting, is that certain commanders, heroes, or warlords may change the role of certain units in your army. It may take a unit that's a specialist under this commander, then becomes a core unit. That I'm really fascinated to see what comes from that.
And we have some examples in the armies we're going to discuss in the near future that actually does happen. So more to come on that.
Yeah, so stay tuned. We'll take a look at that in, the couple armies that we'll be giving you a sneak preview for, is that ability of a commander to sort of change the role, which to me adds a little bit kind of thematic coolness into an army list, where you have a certain commander who, he gets to bring his guys as his core bodyguard or whatever, because, he is the Lizard King or whatever.
The other thing that I really like is they've kind of cleaned up spellcasting in general. So if you're a spellcaster, you have the spellcaster trait. If you are a spellcaster, you can then give them as many of these spells from the Arcane Library spellbook as you want. But the caveat here is they're all unique now. Each one of these spells can only be in the army once.
Instead of trying to put one or legendary spells, they just said flat out the arcane list of spells, which we won't read through all of them, but it's going to have what you think. It's going to have like your Alchemist Curse or your Host Shadow Beast, all your sort of, not your basic spells. These spells are all considered unique.
Let's pick out a couple of your favorite. Host Shadow Beast 5 for 20 points. Host Shadow Beast 8 for 30 points?
I'm going to make some chonky boys.
What's some of the ones you enjoy?
Well, Barkskin I've always loved as a spell, and I'm curious, again, going into where I think lower defense Berserker infantry is going to be better. Barkskin is really good on that type of unit. So Barkskin 5 for 25 points I think is going to be a really good spell. I like that. Damage mitigation, like you said, Host Shadow Beast. Celestial Restoration, I'm curious to see. You can either get a 2 dice or a 3 dice. I like healing spells, so I'm curious to see sort of what are the rules on that. Where did that spell end up? But I just like the idea. These are unique. They're not limited. So these are not just one per battalion. These are one for your whole army.
Yes.
So, and it's simple, Rob. It's not like, well, I can take Blood Boil on multiple guys, but I can only take Alchemist Curse on one guy. It's a little bit clearer, I think.
We talked about spamming maybe units that are like maybe under costed or whatever. This is the same sort of thing. Like, it's going to make you think, okay, if I can only have one Veil of Shadows in my list, 3 for 30 points or 4 for 35, where do I put it in the list? Which commander with the spellcaster trait gets this spell? We don't know yet. Can it cast more than one spell per turn? I don't know if that's changed or not. I assume not. That's been the rule since first edition.
Yeah.
But there's 12 spells in the Arcane Library spellbook.
Yeah. So and all the ones that you would think would be there are there. So again, it's going to be another choice. Is going to be you're going to have to thinking about, okay, I can take one of these spells from this list, and then also what is going to be interesting is that they're going to be introducing as part of the Invasion series, and this they've spoiled this many times, that your faction may have a couple spells too.
Yeah.
So that's going to be another sort of lever of choice. So I just feel like when I'm taking a step back and looking at the army construction, in some ways, I feel like there's more. Even though there's structure around it and there's slots and to me, I feel there's going to be more. It's almost like more tactical decisions will need to be made in this style of list building.
It's more complicated.
Yeah.
And so it's going to take a little bit more time. There's more levers to be pulled.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
It will take more effort
adjust
to build that list, to try to optimize it, right? Because in the past, I've complained about, a horde unlocks 4 troops. Well, in this one, most troops are probably for common stuff are going to be auxiliary units. So you're going to need to have a core unit to take 1 troop. I'm very excited. I'm very optimistic. I also feel like it's giving us more levers to pull in terms of construction, but on the balancing side, on the back end, there's multiple ways to limit, spam. The classification that you use, whether it's core, specialist, support, etc., will have a limiting effect. You have the ability to limit a number of units per battalion with the limited number. You can also make something unique, which means once per army, and they're even doing it with spells. I'm really appreciative of the constraint. It's interesting. If you think about from a creative endeavor, whether you're painting or sculpting, I've always found that I can be more creative when I have to apply it in the context of a lot of restraint.
No, it was a great debate for those people who liked Howard Stern back in the day when he was on regular radio and had to make his jokes based through like the confines of what he could say or not say on the radio. And then you go to Sirius and you can say whatever you want. What's more creative, right? Sometimes having structure gives you the opportunity to try to, okay, I got to be within this structure. What can I do? And I love the idea of characters tweaking things. And to me, I don't necessarily want the game. All right, not necessarily. I do not want the game won in the list building phase, but building lists and thinking about that is fun. So I like that there's a little bit more to think about of okay, I got to get my 2 cores. What do I want to do? Am I going to make am I not even go specialist? Maybe I just want to go full core, go crazy 8 core so that I can get my supports, you know what I mean? Or do I want to do 4 and 4? I think there's going to be a lot of really interesting soil to sort of experiment.
List building is an actual real thought exercise now. Before, 2nd edition, 3rd edition, 3.5, there wasn't much change there. Maybe we changed what was a regular. You have a unit like a regiment or a horde, it unlocks for the most part. And I think this changes the game. To your point, I don't think it makes it a list building game, but I would say that more effort will have to be placed on list building to creatively find the army that works for you.
Yeah, I think in the old system, if you wanted to be the mayor of Value Town, right, you would just find out in your town which unit has the most value, and then you would just try to go, what unit was undercosted. Okay, I want to make my army have as many of those as possible. And maybe there's still some of that. Maybe you'll discover in an army that there's a certain specialist unit in your army, and your goal in list construction is to get as many battalions in your lists as possible with all 4 specialist slots filled up by this one unit. But it's not that simple, right? Because each battalion, you got to have core, you got to have a commander.
4 specialists require 4 core and a commander. You're at 9 drops for a battalion
already
with 1. And if you want to do that too, that's 18 drops. Not saying that couldn't be done. It's probably a good comment to make, is that it also feels like, yes, while it is there's maybe a little more restraint put on us, you're not completely boxed in. If you want to go crazy and build 3 battalions and figure out a way to do that, that's a puzzle, man. I'm sure you can. There's going to be somebody will figure this out.
Yeah. So I like the little extra complexity on the surface. I think it's going to be a little bit more interesting. I'm really curious to see this idea versus limited versus unique. along with the commanders changing battlefield rules for certain units, I think that's going to really add to those people who are not looking for the most optimized, but are looking to build theme. I think that this structure is going to have stuff for both those players, right? I'm the Adam Ballard, right? So I'm going to be looking at my list and I'm going to absolutely have every slot maximized up the wazoo. Or I want a more fun thematic army, so I'm taking this commander that makes my X unit core and I'm just going to run all of them. You know what I mean? And it's going to be like, the so-and-so's royal bodyguard or whatever.
Or you are playing an army that historically has been a theme army. Now you take this warlord or this commander, and now you have access to core units you didn't have before.
For sure.
So yeah, I'm very excited about this. This is exactly what I was hoping for from an army construction thing. Now, that being said, we're talking about this out of the context of actually seeing what's core, what's specialist. And so that might be something we quibble about in the future. Oh, I think this should be, specialist versus support. Because I mean, ultimately, core is going to be the most prevalent. Specialist will be the next prevalent, right, in terms of numbers, and then support. Core is super easy to get. You can take as many as you want.
Yeah. And each battalion that you add, you have to check all your other battalions. Do they have 4 core? So if you're wanting 3 battalions, 4 core in the first battalion, that's 4 core in the second battalion, plus all your accoutrements. So I'll be surprised if there are armies that have 3 battalions. To me, I think it's going to be either 1 or 2, probably. I'm curious to see.
Well, in a way, what you're actually saying is it feels like it's almost like a diminishing return. Like, okay, I want more support. But it's like, well, do I really want to pay to get all those other things to get more support? Ultimately, what I'm really keen to see is, does this change fundamentally the way we put armies on the table?
Yeah, construct armies.
Do they look different? Are they more balanced?
Yeah.
With some of the things I'm hearing about the way range just changed and stuff like that. And obviously, we don't know about the scenarios yet. But I assume when taking army building, army construction into account within the context of the wider rule set, I'm really excited to see the impact. Like I'm optimistic we're going to see more balanced list. I think SKU lists are probably still viable. Like you can still build them, but it's maybe not skewed to, you might not be able to take 12 of that unit. You might be able to take 6.
Yeah. Is there a faction that's going to have like really strong core units? To maybe that faction, you don't even take specialists or support. I'm just going to put core bodies. I'm just going to overload the board with core and some heroes and just try to, just outgrind you.
People did that in the past. Like, I'm just going to field a bunch of scarecrows. With the way scenario conditions, maybe we're going to see that. Because, I mean, limiting 2 to a facing in combat, the less shooting, I think boys before toys is going to be a real thing in this edition.
Yeah, and it could be. And that's the exciting part, and something that I know Ronnie spoke to. The first 6 months of an edition, I think, are always so crazy and fun. Because people are throwing stuff against the wall. They're trying to see what sticks. Oftentimes something, and I always use the example of teleporting Lady Alona that we thought for all of 2 weeks on Universal Battle was going to be the most broken thing ever, but then ended up not being a thing. Like, what are people going to come up once all this stuff gets into your own personal basement and it's outside of playtesters, it's outside of Alessio and Matt, and people start coming up with their homebrew, their own stuff? What are people going to throw at the dartboard? What's going to stick? What's not going to stick?
It's a new puzzle. So I'm excited. We should mention before we get out of here, just like in 3.5, there still will be upgrades and options for some units where the cost of those upgrades are based on the size of the unit, where they would say something like 10, 15, and 20, and that's troop, regiment, and horde. And in addition, certain commanders will change the unit type, so it might move something from a specialist to a core. Also, base size changing, the only ones we have are individuals that were on 25 or 20 millimeter bases are now on 40s, and individual heroes that were on cav bases are now on 50s. I also appreciate that. Even though they've completely overhauled the army construction, they didn't really mess with the base sizes. Now, we don't obviously know unit sizes, like do things that used to be hordes are not horde. I don't know about that, but in terms of base sizes, minimum impact for rebasing, which is great.
You may have something in a horde that makes more sense to take as a regiment now. Outside of that, but raw base size changes. That appears to be the only real change.
Just the individuals, basically, which is great.
As a maker of diorama basing, to me, I'm like, and someone who forgets where his individuals are sometimes because they're so tiny, I'm all for the change.
I know we've talked about individuals. I just think in general, individuals, obviously the charging and all of that stuff is complicated. Also the moving it legally is difficult. So I just think putting something on a 40 or 50 millimeter base, a square, just makes it easy.
Because people forget an individual in the past game had one free facing and 2 pivots. That's not the same as being able to pick it up and put it wherever you want.
Correct. Yeah. You're a cavalry base and you put the long side, the 50 side, up against the back of your unit. Well, you have to basically walk away. You can either reface 180 degrees and walk that way, or you got to walk that way. You can't pivot and end unless you're a flyer, you can't end your pivot on top of a unit. And also, this is a small thing, but we got commands. And we probably have auras on those heroes and stuff. And I think having a little bit bigger base, maybe that'll come to play. There's a little bit more, maybe inspiring now is a little bit more impactful, especially if you got an army standard bearer that has very inspiring and now they're on a 40 millimeter base. That's pretty cool.
Well, when you think about the fact that there's no more wavering and inspiring didn't do anything about wavering and only you're either dead or not dead, that inspire reroll now is because on the inspire reroll, of killing, it's either going to not kill or kill. It's not going to be like, well, you killed me into a waiver. You know what I mean? It's going to be still into a I'm still fighting.
Yeah, and for those that don't know, and we were talking about this about Fearless, it appears there are ways to still be wavered. And they're not ways you even think about. The one about range, yes. But there's some other ones coming that you could end up being wavered. That, I think, is where Fearless is still going to come to play. Oh, I would normally be wavered in this situation. I'm not because I'm Fearless.
We have on the docket to do some highlights into a couple new factions. Also, we'll be covering some of the new movement orders. As we've joked about, countercharge has changed as far as an actual rule. So we'll take a look at some of those new movement orders and how they might affect your games. And
we never shy away from controversy, right? And what's more controversial than the withdraw special rule? So we'll be diving deep into that. What does that mean for the game? 100%, it is 50 times better than the old rule. It's much more interesting. I'm cringing a little bit because Adam Ballard is going to use this rule in a new way that people are not going to see coming. So we'll, I'm excited.
I think, and again, it speaks to on the surface, I think they've removed some stuff. So your first gut is they've taken things out, but they've also, it's just such a different new game with still the spirit of Kings that it's just, there's going to be lots of different strategies. I think just the 2 units charging a facing, that's going to issue a whole nother of I think we're going to do a lot more like different lines, right? Front line, midline, reserve. There's going to be a lot more. How do I deploy? I think deployment is going to be way more important.
And withdraw is going to play a huge role because it's going to allow you to pick and choose potentially what units get into combat because you have limited units in combat. Yes. Now you're going to be able to get stuff out of combat, get through. So I'm really excited. So yeah, on the next episode, we'll dive into the withdraw special rule. Jeremy, I'm excited. Army building.
Short and sweet. Super exciting.
Army building is 2 thumbs up for me.
I love it. I think it's really cool. I can't wait to get a hands on the new rule book with all the basic armies and then the first invasion book to see all the, the fully fledged out. And it's going to be exciting. I think Ronnie says every 6 months they're going to release a new invasion book. It's going to be really cool. And I'm a book collector, so I'm excited to have them all in my shelf. And if you look closely, you see on their sides, it looks as maybe there might be an image formed if you have all the books next to each other on a shelf, which looks pretty cool. So,
and the way they've implemented commands in 4th edition, genius. I love it.
Well, as a huge fan of Firefight, man, all the little elements of Firefight that has made its way over into Kings, sign me up.
All right, well, that's going to do us tonight. And until next time, keep countercharging.
Thanks for listening. And we'll see you next time on Countercharge. Please let us know what you thought of the show by emailing us at counterchargepodcast@gmail.com, on Twitter @countercharge15, or by commenting on the Countercharge Kings of War podcast Facebook group. If you enjoy the show, you can help others find out about it by leaving positive reviews on iTunes. Until next time, keep countercharging. Music is a composition of Kevin MacLeod and is licensed under Creative Commons.